Good evening and welcome. I'm going to spend about 40 minutes just going through the reporting system. And I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about how I would advise you to have conversations with your children around what's going on their reports and how you would do it in a sort of Evolve Online way. The Evolve reporting system reflects the very different nature of the Evolve Online approach. So we have what's called a growth mindset approach. So when a child does something, it's never their last chance to do it. There's always this belief that there's an opportunity for them to improve. We talk about the power of yet. And what that means is that a child never hasn't done something, they just haven't done it yet. They haven't not achieved mastery, they just haven't achieved mastery yet. And they haven't not handed it in, they just haven't handed it in yet. And what that does, that fundamentally changes the conversation you have with your child about their performance. When you sign into your reporting system, you're going to see a screen like this, and you're going to see your child's name on the screen. And when you select your child's name, these two options will open up to you. There's a goals section of our reporting system, and there's an activities section of our reporting system. And should you now, the starting point for you is to go and have a look at the goals. The goals are going to tell you if your child has achieved mastery or where they are on the continuum of achieving mastery in their reports. I should mention up front that the company that has developed this for us is doing the final UI finishing off and tweaks for us at the moment. So there are a few cosmetic changes that have been made or are going to be made to these reports, but nothing substantive, nothing that's any different from what I'm explaining to you tonight. Just makes it easier to grasp some of the things that are going to be seen, and I'll explain some of the UI changes as we go. So when you click on the goals, what it'll do is it'll take you into your child's subjects or learning areas or courses, whatever word we want to use for it. Within the Evolve mastery system, we talk about a goal set. So there's a goal set for each of these subjects. There's a goal set for English, etc., etc. And what you see on this particular screen is the subjects your child's enrolled for, and then we break the points down into mastery and application. So I need to emphasize that we don't talk about marks at Evolve. We talk about points. And the intention or the purpose or the process that your child follows is a process of accumulating points. So they'll write a mastery task, or they will do a little test, or they will hand in a comprehension, or they will do some practicing of maths. And every time they do those things, they can accumulate points. And the goal is to accumulate enough points for us to be able to say, you've done this enough and you've shown through your summative work that you have actually mastered what it is you set out to master. And you'll see here at the bottom of the screen, I think it's a bit cut off for you, but you'll see here there's a key that you can use to interpret what these stars mean. So you have your points. In English, for example, in the mastery category here, it was possible to accumulate 1,265 points so far, and this child has accumulated 1,166 of those, and so forth. Now, what that means is, if you add these two sets of points together and you work out what percentage of these points have been accumulated, you can then get a rating of your degree of competence in the subject. And we have these different scales, and I know I'm not going to get it right, so I thought I would just throw poor Laura under the bus and say, Laura, don't you mind helping me out here and just explaining the percentage sort of process we use for deciding what star to assign. So if this is blank, it means there are no points accumulated. And then it goes through this range. We will publish the range so that you know. But basically, what you're looking for are blue stars. The minute a child has mastered something, it's either going to be a light blue star or the dark blue with a circle around it. And that means they've exceeded the collection of 80% of the points that are possible to collect in that particular subject.
So it's 0 to 10 is embarking, which is the first one. Then 10 to 50, 50, is emerging. And then 50 to 65 is advancing. 65 to 80 is competent. 80 to 90 is mastered. And then over 90 is exceeded mastery.
Right. So if there's no points accumulated, we used to put this empty star there. So you'll see in this old interface, there's no points accumulated, so there's an empty star. But on the final version of this, that's just blank if there's no points accumulated. Okay, so generally, and as you go through the report, it'll actually be quite obvious and apparent to you, and it's not complicated, but you need to be looking out for the blue stars in the space. Now, what I want to just illustrate, if you select the English, you can dig a bit deeper. So you're looking at your child's report and you see they haven't yet, don't forget that word yet, they haven't yet achieved mastery in English. Okay. And the way the hierarchy of our system works, at the most basic level, we have what we call our know-bads, what a child should know or be able to do. In the language of the reporting system, they talk about an item. The items all accumulate together to give you an answer to a particular goal that is the holding place for all those items. Goals get together to make categories. Categories get together to make subjects. So going in the other direction, we're digging down into English. We're going to go and look at the categories. The next level down is categories. And over here, you can see that actually this child has achieved mastery in a number of categories of English. There's the handwriting, they just haven't started yet. But there are two areas, the parts of speech and grammar and the phonics, where they're still working at achieving mastery. Now, at the end of the screen, there's this progress bar or progress icon. And what the progress icon does is it tells you that all the work has been handed in, all the work has been done for this particular category. And I'll show you an example a little bit later about where it's not all done. But despite all the work being done, this child has only arrived at the emerging level or the developing level in the language that's on the screen at the moment, which means they're under 65% on that particular subject. Please, it's not 65% in terms of marks. It's 65% of the points that could be accumulated towards that mastery level. And so, as you can imagine, we add all the category points together to make up the subject points, and then we go down and dig deeper and deeper. So, I'm not as worried about the fact that this child has a green and not a blue here, because when I dig down, I can see actually they're doing quite all right in 3 of their goals. Their categories. It's just these 2 categories that they haven't quite achieved mastery yet. If I look at this one, and this is one of the changes we made, we've got an icon representation instead of the numbers, so that you can see at a glance which of these needs to be paid attention to. You don't need to do all the adding up. So you would see that this bar graph would be, or this icon would be full, but this one would be halfway, and you can then hone in immediately on where you can assist your child or where your child needs to get some support from their coach or their activator. And then in this one, it's not a problem. They haven't started yet. And when they do, they'll get going on that. I can now choose one of them, and I want to I deliberately choose one that's got a blue star, because what it's telling you is that this is not an area that your child is struggling in. Writing is not an area that your child is struggling in. It's the other 2 areas they must pay attention to. But even in an area where they've achieved mastery, there can still be areas where they haven't completely mastered the particular issue or the particular thing that needs to be mastered. And so they've handed everything in, but if you can see on the application side, they haven't accumulated as many points as they have on the mastery side. And that's not necessarily where you want them to spend their time, but it's worth noting, because it might be something that you want to look into later, just to make sure that it's not becoming a problem. On our dashboard on the teacher side, of course, we would be doing the same, but we look at it from a whole class perspective before digging down into the names of the pupils who are in these categories. So you can, in fact, achieve mastery in something without having to achieve mastery in every single piece that belongs to that something. You can achieve mastery in a subject without achieving mastery in all the categories of the subject. And you can achieve mastery in a category without achieving mastery in all the goals of that category. What we do want, where you don't achieve mastery in a goal, is we are looking for a green star. We are wanting at least a green star. If the star is not green, if your child has achieved mastery, but there's a star a layer down that isn't green, you will want them to pay attention, because then they run the risk of carrying a gap through to the next year with them. And now you can say, okay, well, let's have a look at the punctuation. Let's have a quick look-see and see what it is that's causing an issue here. And you can dig down into that. And here you can see immediately when it comes to using question marks, quotation, or exclamation marks, this child has it waxed. They've exceeded the mastery levels on these two goals or items. We're at an item level now. This is the lowest level. But they haven't, and they've achieved mastery there, but it's actually in the use of capital letters, the space between words, and the full stop, where in fact they need to do a little bit more work. I can see that the work needs to be done here on the application side, and that just doing that will probably change that star green, just one little task here. And in a moment, when I go into the other side of this reporting system, you'll be able to dig in and say, okay, well, let's go and actually have a look where the work is that can be improved upon in that space. I'll show you another example. Here we have a subject, mathematics. This child has achieved mastery in mathematics, but when we go down a little bit, we can see actually in these two categories, in the numbers and operations and algebra, they've done it. There's their mastery star, there's their blue star. When it comes to the space and shape geometry, that's where they still need to work. But when you look at the progress bar here, you see, oh, wait a minute, they haven't done all the work yet. And that's not necessarily a problem. It may just be that the deadline for that piece of work hasn't arrived yet. And so you can say, okay, well, let's have a look further. We dig down into that. And what's emerging here is a picture of this must be the section they're busy with at the moment. So they're still busy working on it. So the lack of mastery in this area, or the fact that they haven't yet achieved mastery in this area, is not necessarily anything to be concerned about. It'll come with time, especially if you look at the results for the other categories and the other goals in this section. And then if we dig down a little further, it becomes very clear to us. They've done that one. There's an exceeded mastery level there. With the next one, there's still some work to be done or to be handed in. It's probably a 15 marker. And given the pattern of this child's results, it's quite likely that the minute they hand that in, that star is going to turn blue. And then in this bottom one, they haven't started that one yet. So it's obviously just been given to them to do. And again, as soon as they apply their minds, they're quite likely to move that up into the mastery level. And so even at this level, we've got nothing to worry about. This child has achieved mastery. At the level below that, the picture that's emerging is they're likely to achieve mastery here as soon as they complete their work. So it's not something to get concerned about at all. If I move on now to the second part, the activities part of our report, when you dig down into the activities part of our report, this is where you can see how your child is doing in terms of keeping up with the pacing of the work that they need to do. And so you have a report that looks something like that. I didn't mention it, but one of the UI changes to the goal side is this date range situation here. So you can actually filter the goals based on a date range. And so you can say, let me just look at how they're doing in the first term, or let me look how they're doing in the second term, or how are they doing this month or this week. And I'll talk to that at the end, because it gives you a very, very powerful tool to help your child manage their progress and their work ethic. What you see on this screen is the whole year's work. There are 233 things that this child has completed, 23 not started, 23 overdue. They're averaging one at a submission per task. They're handing their stuff in on time 78% of the time, and on average they're hitting they're giving their stuff in about a day and a half early. So that's a lovely pattern that's emerging there. One thing we do want to see is a higher than 1 average in the submissions, because that ties into the yet. If you don't achieve mastery in something the first time you do it, that's interesting. That's great. It means that you haven't achieved mastery yet, but that's not the end. It's not you try it, you didn't get it, you move on. What you want to do is you want to say, okay, I didn't achieve mastery. Let me go back and let me look at where I didn't get my points, where I didn't accumulate my points. Let me do that again, and let me see if I can up my score in this one. And in fact, you always keep your highest score. And I need to point out that there's absolutely no penalty for late submission of work. We don't penalize late submission. We're interested in completeness. We're interested in mastery. A child can submit the thing as soon as they're ready to submit it. And I do have some families that manage their learning in a different way. So they may do maths on a Monday and Tuesday, and they focus on English on Wednesday, and they do their ideas on Thursday. And so if a deadline comes up for ideas or English on the Monday or Tuesday, they're not focusing on it. So that will perforce show up as a handed in late thing. And because of the context in which they're working, it's perfectly acceptable. The important thing is that ultimately that line must not end up red, or very little of that line must end up red. Just a comment, I hadn't noticed until 2 days ago when I was doing the webinar that we had fallen into the trap of the traditional use of red on our reports. So I've instructed the UI developers to change that to an amber color instead, because I think that's less threatening and more kind of indicative of our growth mindset. Now, what you can do is you can filter this information. And so you can see, if you look on the top left here now, I've filtered it so that it's only displaying the second term. And in the second term, there's been 114 things handed in, 16 not started, 16 overdue. And a very interesting pattern emerges, because if you remember correctly, for the year, this child was averaging a 78% on-time submission. That has dropped to 62% in the second term. Now, that's interesting. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but that's interesting. It's worth digging into and saying, let's try and understand why that's happened. It's quite possible that they had a problem with COVID in their household. It's possible that they went away and so they missed out on a bit of work and have to come back and catch up. There are all kinds of reasons. As long as you can think and work through a legitimate reason for that to be the case, then that's fine. But if the answer is your child bought a new game and they've been so busy playing the new game, they got a new game for their birthday at the beginning of the second term, and they've been so busy playing that new game that they haven't been handing in their work, well, that requires a bit of an adjustment. That requires a plan on their part. So now the next thing I can do is I can select a specific subject. So now I'm choosing English as a specific subject. And again, the data changes to reflect the English only, completed 9, not started 2, 5 overdue, still only averaging one submission per task. But yeah, you can see that actually when it comes to the English, they've got a better rate of submission than they had overall for the term. And if I dig down into the English, I can now see the actual items, the work that needs to be done to change this picture. And what's fascinating is, I mean, you can see on the side here, this has been handed in. I forgot to mention this light blue means it's been handed in, but not marked. The dark blue means it's been handed in and the teacher has marked it. The amber, which is now red, means that they are going to, they're overdue in handing that in, and the empty circles mean that they haven't handed it in yet. There's also a yellow, which indicates that something has been started, but it's not overdue yet. So the kid is in progress with some stuff, and that's quite cool to see as well. So you'll see at the bottom in the key, well, barely, there's a yellow in progress icon as well. And so this is us digging down. It is possible to go one layer deeper if you want to. You can dig down into a particular item like this, and there you can see for this particular thing, this child has accessed it 4 times, submitted it once, managed to get right to, it's been completed and graded. They scored 12 out of 13 points, or they accumulated 12 out of 13 of the points possible there. They submitted it before the due date, and they achieved an exceeded level of mastery. And if the teacher has made a comment, then you're going to see the comment on the right-hand side here. Sometimes our teachers do comments with voice notes, and that we tried to get that included in this part of the interface where you could just click on it and listen to the teacher's comment. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So the other thing you can do is you can pick a particular category. You can pick a particular block within the subject, and then that filters it down to just the things that relate to that block. So for example, you can choose the red block and then go into that, and now you can see these are the 5 items that need to be done, that need to be handed in. And for every item that exists in this list on the Blackboard Learning Management System, if they go onto their markbook, they will find exactly that in their markbook. They will find Chapter 1 online multiple choice questions in their markbook. They can click on it straight away and they can do the work that way. Before I move on into the questions, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about how you use the power of yet in your household, and how you use the power of oh how interesting in your household to change the nature of the conversation that you have with your child from a traditional one to a growth mindset one. This is the process I would like to suggest you follow in managing your children's performance, in managing your children's outcomes and reports. What you need to do when the reports are published on the 4th of August is you need to spend some time by yourself digging into it a little bit. You need to make some notes. You need to dig down into a few items to get kind of an overview of how your child is doing. What you need to focus on are 2 things. You need to focus on all the areas where your child has got a blue star, either the light or the dark blue star. And you need to note a few of those things. You need to note where their strength lies, either in a subject or within the categories or within the goals, wherever it is. You need to record, you need to be ready to speak to your child's strengths. And then you need to look into the 2 areas. You need to look into the areas that need more work in order to achieve mastery, and you need to look into the areas where there may be work that's past its due date, where some effort is going to be needed to hand that work in. If your child didn't join us at the beginning of the year, then what you want to do is you want to filter this report onto the term rather. Focus to start off with, focus on the second term, so that you filter the dates in that way, so that you can start with the most recent, and also start with work that your child has actually been present to be able to do. So you make those notes for yourself before you have a meeting with your child. So what you want to do is have a good insight before you actually have the meeting, so that there's not a kind of a discovery or shock in any way when you're busy doing it with your child. I really don't advise you to go through the report with your child the first time you go with the report. You don't want to slip into an old way of, oh, why hasn't this done, or why is this late, or why haven't you? There's no why have in Evolve. There's only yet. Okay. And then what you do is you have a time, you decide the next night you're going to sit down together and you're going to spend an hour or 2 just going through the report with them. And when you're going through the report that first time, bring some donuts home or ice cream or some sort of a treat that you can have. And what you want to do on that first night is only focus on the excellent. You want to spend a night honing in on what your child has done well, where they've attained mastery, where they've got good hand-in rates, all of those sorts of things, where they've managed to discipline themselves in order to stay on track. And what you want to then do is you want to also say to them, open up your learner management system. I noticed this one task of yours, I noticed this one task of yours was like amazing. You got one of these exceeded stars. Show me that work. Let me have a look at what you did. Tell me a bit about it. I mean, your teacher thinks it's awesome. Share it with me. I'd also like to see it. I'd also like to know how you did and how that went for you. When you've spent time doing that, my advice is you then have your ice cream, you have your donuts, you go watch some of the Olympics, or you go out for a walk, and that's it for the day. The next day or on the weekend, you're going to say, right, we've got a bit more time. Let's do some planning. And now you're going to go back into the report system and you're going to start looking at the brown stars and the yellow stars. And you're going to start saying, and some of the green stars, you're going to say, right, let's, you say to your child, if they're old enough, or if they want to do it, you guide me through this report. Show me where you think you need to do more work. Show me where you think you might need a little bit of help. Let's go and have a look at what your power of yet is. Let's go and see where your area lies for you to improve the outcomes for yourself. Now, what you need to understand about our reporting system is that it's live. From the moment it goes live, it's live. It gets updated every night. The data is downloaded. Every morning, it's put onto this platform. And so every morning when you go in, any work that your child did the day before will show up on this report. And that is an incredibly powerful incentive for children, to be able to go and do some work, go back into the reporting system, and that yellow star has turned green, or that green star has turned blue. It's going to be addictive for them to be able to do it if you manage it in a way that it is a growth mindset approach. And you don't want to give your child the answers. What you want to do is say to your child, okay, let's look through this, let's dig in a little bit. Now that I've shown you what I found, and now that you've been able to show me what you think is an area where you need some help in, go off to your room. We'll meet a little bit later. Come back to me with a plan. Come back to me with an idea of how you're going to manage this process. Now, what you're doing when you do that is you're teaching your child the most valuable transferable skill they can ever learn. You're teaching them how to be metacognitive about themselves. You're teaching them how to reflect on their work and come up with solutions to any areas that they think they can do some work in. And that is, that is just incredible. What you're then able to do is go through the plan with them, and then they need to open up their learner management system. They need to go to the calendar part of their management system, and they actually need to plot out in the calendar when they're putting time aside to implement their plan. Their plan must actually be have a deadline for it. They must create a new deadline for themselves, and they must do the work again. If they've handed something in 3 times, it locks. Because we want to have sight of when a child is struggling with something, but all they need to do is pop a message to their teacher saying they'd like to do the task again, and the teacher will unlock it for them. So there's literally no limit to how often children can keep trying to accumulate points for themselves. Of course, in a healthy way. It's no good that they become OCD and they want to just keep handing it in 40 times just to get it up by 1 point. Rather concentrate in other areas, or just go for a walk or play with your dog, or throw a ball around rather than sitting at the screen. And so that's, and at the end of that process of planning with them, don't forget to remind them that the first day you discussed it with them, they had done some brilliant things. Go back to the brilliance. Go back to the part where you're saying that they mustn't get so bogged down in what they have to do that they stop celebrating what they've already achieved. You want to celebrate those successes. I want to say one last thing about this, and then I'll open up for questions. And what I want to say is, please don't compliment or praise the points. Praise the effort. You need to say, the reason you got points like that, the reason you got that star is because of the effort you put into it, okay? If you're seeing that your child is handing in something once only and hitting the exceeded star every single time they hand it in once, what you want to do is make an appointment with Laura to see if we shouldn't be moving your child up a level. They shouldn't be able to hit an exceeded level for everything they do just by handing it the first time. They should be struggling. There should be some areas where they need to dig in and roll up their sleeves and get going. And if that's not the case, it means that they're probably in a level that's too easy for them. And the opposite is also true. If they've only got brown and yellow stars and they've handed everything in 3 times, they might be needing to move down a level in order to be back in their comfort zone for learning. Everyone, that's really my spiel. That's what I have to say. I'll just quickly speak to Michelle's question. There, Laura's just answered it. But I do want to say that we are working on embedding this thing completely in Stacy. So the idea would be you would log into Stacy, and then there's a menu item that you can click on. We will send the guide home, and that will take you into this reporting system. And that's also where we're going to load the CAPS report. So we're also going to be giving your child a more traditional report to use, because the department is going to want that from you at the end of the year. And if you need to move back into a conventional school, then they're going to want a report that looks like that as well. But unlike a normal, well, normal is the wrong word, unlike a traditional school, those reports aren't static. So if your child gets, the way you would be experiencing this in the past is your child gets 60 out of whatever, or 60% for English in term 1, and that's it. Unless there's marks that have been not allocated properly, or unless, you know, here or there a teacher's willing to do something, that mark is locked in. And that's the mark they have for term 1 for the rest of the year. Our system doesn't work like that. So the minute they do the work, the mark improves. And this is the only time I'll talk about marks. And so what we plan to do is to update the CAPS report every month. So you'll get your first CAPS report, but if your child keeps working and works on first term or second term work, the next time the CAPS report comes out, it's actually going to have a different result on it for term 1. It's not a static mark at Evolve Online. You know, we're not there yet as far as we are concerned. There's so much more we can do. There's so much more we want to do. You know, version 1.2 is already in progress. As soon as we've signed off on this one, we can start working on the improvements on this report, and the other aspects that we can bring, the other information that we can bring into the report for you. So we do intend to improve it. Because the name of our school is Evolve. So there's no way we're just going to sit back and say, now we've done it, let's move on. We intend to do that. And one of the things that's really going to drive that for us is the feedback we get from our parents. So if you come back to us and say, this is unwieldy, you know, it takes me, I want to start here, not end there, or, you know, it would be better if the information included this or that, then please feel free to give us a shout, and we can put it into our discussion about how we improve our product.